Okay, this transporter is a 251.
Directional indicators and all that shit.
And it's got an engine light on. This one's fitted with the CAAC engine.
All I know is that bumper's over $2.5 grand.
Yeah. It's got an expensive bumper on it.
Oh, deer hit it, didn't it?
Oh yeah, the deer hit it. So the fault code I've got is where are we at here? P2563 turbocharger boost sensor circuit range performance. So the first thing I've done is turbo's down at the back of the engine down there, and the wires, you can see where the wires go into the back. Down there you can see the wires in this corrugated wire that I've gone into here with the conduit, and you can see the vacuum pipe right next to it that comes up here into this one there. So my next test was to see what do we have for wires, and we've got the 5 volts on the red, the brown is a ground, and the yellow and grey, the last one, is the signal. And with no vacuum and the ignition on, we've got 0.4 volts. So this pipe that I'm into here, this hose just goes down to the turbo, to the actuator. So I wanted to see if it works, and as long as I've got this on vacuum, I can give it vacuum, and we can see the actuator move, and at the same time we see this pressure sensor move. I can get it to go up to 3.4, that seems to be where it stops, doesn't change after that. And it's holding, I'm not pumping this anymore, it's holding pressure. So it looks like that side of it might be okay, unless it's expecting to see a higher read in there at the full extent of the range. But it's okay, it's not going to leak. So we know this hose is okay, and we know the diaphragm down there is okay in the actuator. So next I'm going to do some checks at the actual solenoid here and see what's going on. And it is working, it's getting vacuum. It's gone to 2.4 at idle, so it is working. So we've just got to figure out what it doesn't like about this. Maybe it's sticking at some point. I went to rev the car and it's gone back down to this, the voltage we had with the ignition on only. So for some reason, we've still got the 5 volts in the ground. For some reason it's not happy with something and it switched it off, but it didn't do that until I went to rev it. I'll go and start the car again. So the coil light's on and the engine light's on. I'll start this one more time.
It's back.
It's back.
Yeah, that's what's happening when the coil light comes on.
So when the coil light comes on, this stops working. So we're going to try and rev it again and see what happens. Yeah, okay, cheers. That's working okay now. Well, now it's working, but we did see it a minute ago that it stopped working when I did that. Oh, now it's gone. Now it's gone. Okay, we'll try this again. Yep. So you see the lines in the bottom of the screen because most of the time it's off. Coil lights out. I'm going to try revving it, I'll see if it stops. That's gone. Yeah. See the line at the top of it's now, so it's most of the time it's switched off, so it's choosing to switch this off for some reason. At the same time that it's also, we're seeing this that goes to 0.4 volts, so it doesn't like something. I don't know if that's slightly too low, because 0.5 is usually, you know, the end of its voltage range, and 4.5 is the other end, but it's only a little bit off, so I don't know if that's what it's not happy about.
The adjustment that way's good.
This does go all the way to 3.4 volts if I use this. Going in through this hose here that goes down to the turbo actuator. 3.4, and it goes to the stop screw that's in the back of the turbo. So it is going all the way to the stop screw at 3.4, and if I take this off and connect it as it should be, it's at 2.4 with the engine at tick over. So it's obviously, it's happy to be there, it's by choice, it's controlling it to be there. I don't understand why it's cutting this out, it's stopping controlling this, and then we get the voltage going back down to that. It doesn't like something. It's not saying it's an overboost condition, it's saying it's the signal. But we have a signal the whole time. The point of that is that the turbo linkage down there isn't seized, it can go further. That was my point, what I was trying to say. I thought it might be sticking and not going as far down as it needs, but it can go further than what it's controlling it at. So I think, I don't know yet why, I've got to do some more checking. Checked on the auto data that I've got on my phone, and it says for this, ignition on should be 0.9 of a volt, and with the engine idling it's 3.8. So we are a bit off with this. That sensor's not capable of going that high with the voltage, it only goes up to 3.4, and it's a bit lower. Kind of like we said at the beginning, it was at 0.4, hovering around there. So yeah, and sometimes it's going down to like 0.3. So it's like, I think it's just a faulty sensor, it's reading wrong, it's just getting pulled down a bit too much. So that looks like what the problem is. It's never happy with what it's saying, so it shuts off the control. I don't know if this is going to work, but just to try and make it happy, to give it the 0.9 volts with ignition on, I've got 800 ohms going through there, going from the 5 volt reference into the signal wire. So it's got an extra bit of volts going in to put this to where it wanted it to be. Now all I've got to do is start the car and see if it's happy. That might totally confuse it though, so it's just an experiment to see if it's going to be happy. Ignition on, it's gone basically to the same place as before when we started it. It was 0.9 with ignition and 2.4. Yeah, if you rev it a few times, we'll see if it's happy. This does take a little while sometimes before it goes into limpo, but it looks like it's happier now. It's still doing what it should do. So what I'm thinking is, because it's happier now, what I'm thinking is that's maybe all it was, and what it would be is not the voltage here that it didn't like, but it might be the pressure that it was seeing wasn't where the pressure should be, and it's just figured out that something's not right. Seems happy like that, doesn't it? Okay. Could maybe try it for a drive and see what happens. This with that hasn't made a difference. It still keeps switching off. We have tried it to go slightly higher and slightly lower than the 0.9, and you know, with the ignition on, and it still does the same thing. So it doesn't look like that's it. The data maybe on auto data may not be right, I don't know, but still seems a little low. The fact that it's below 0.5 to begin with. Maybe it is just not ideal. What I've done here. I'll have to keep looking into it and see what I can find. Right, I've had a little think about this, and I'm checking this other solenoid. This one is for the EGR cooler valve, which goes down here, and when I apply vacuum to that arm that you see there doesn't move, and I'm applying vacuum, but I also can't pull a vacuum. I'm still set for vacuum there. So I can't pull a vacuum. So I may have a little problem with that. And also I can't move that arm with my hand. It's tight, so it's proper tight in there. So there's something going on there. So my thought is, I don't know now, what I'm thinking is, what if it's trying to command that open through this solenoid, and it's leaking air, it's losing the vacuum because this is not holding a vacuum, so it's going to, you know, it's venting out somewhere. It's not allowing it to build up a vacuum. So maybe if this is switched on, even though this is the EGR cooler, because this isn't sealed, we're losing the vacuum in the system, and this side might have a knock-on effect for the variable vane because we're losing the vacuum out here. So what I'm going to do, in case that's the case, is put a clamp on that hose and connect this again back to here. I done a little bit of filming looking at stuff instead of looking at my camera, so I might not have been showing it. I'm going to put a clamp on this hose and connect that back onto here where it should be, and see then do we have a knock-on effect, because it could be the vacuum isn't getting the position of that where it needs to be because we've got a vacuum leak on this solenoid, on that actuator I mean. So that's it clamped off there. I'm gonna see if it helps. Well, I'm getting higher. It's going higher than it did before. Now we are at 3.4 volts with this at idle. So it's kind of not what auto data said it should be. I can't remember what it should be, but it has lasted a bit longer, and all I've done is clamp this vacuum pipe. There's the 3.4 volts now on the position sensor of the turbo, and auto data said idling it's 3.8. So we are getting closer to where we should be with this clamp on, and so far that light hasn't come out, hasn't come back on, and it's still working. So it looks like we're onto something, and the fault wasn't this solenoid or the turbo actuator for the variable vane. They weren't faulty, even though the fault code said it was the position circuit. It just knew it wasn't where it wanted to be, and the reason it wasn't where it wanted to be is because it wasn't getting the vacuum to here, because it was losing it through this one, a different solenoid. This is for the EGR temperature flat, so the motor at the top is the EGR flow for the gases. That will do the gases, whether it lets the EGR gases get recirculated through the silver pipe or not, and how much gases go through it's controlled by the motor. This one is just whether those gases go through the cooler or don't go through the cooler. Anyway, that flat, I can't even move that, that's seized. in one position, and we also had this couldn't hold vacuum, it was just leaking right out into the air. So maybe the diaphragm's gone in there, and also the linkage is seized down there. That could be what puts strain on it and make the diaphragm go, I don't know. But by putting this on, we've raised the vacuum in the vacuum system, which consequently has raised the vacuum in here, and that's put this in a different place where orthodata said it should be. Before I was at 2.4 volts, now we're not at the 3.8, but we're a lot closer. But then again, that's a little bit lower than that, but it was also lower because it was 0.4 with the ignition on instead of that number of 0.9. So maybe a bit of fault there as well, but if it's happy like this, we could just leave that blanked up until we get round to replacing the cooler. The EGR cooler valve would have, we could do a vacuum test on the new one and it would hold vacuum. This one isn't. This drove okay on the road test, so the temporary fix is we've cable tied this out the way and put a bolt in the end of the hose, so it's not going to that. So that's going to be the next thing. We need to try one of these, a new one, and see if we can free off the linkage, but for now this has fixed the fault that was the turbo sensor position fault because of this EGR cooler, and I take it the diaphragm's split inside there. Hopefully that's been helpful to somebody, and thanks for watching.